Okay, everyone, it's 7 o'clock, so it's time for us to start. There are plenty of seats up here in front, and I guarantee you'll be happy if you move up to the front. The slides that we're going to see today, there's a bunch of them, and there's a fair amount of detail on them. So the closer that you are, unless you have just absolutely incredible vision, much better than mine, you'll be happy if you move up. I know in saying that none of you will actually move up, but but feel free if you change your mind and you want a better look at the slides. We'd love to have you, and there's plenty of seats up here. So thank you all for coming to our town hall tonight. We weren't exactly sure we were going to be ready to do this until just about a week ago, so there's rather short notice, but thank you all for taking time tonight to be with us. It means a lot to me to your love for the parish, your experience of the parish was just so much more vast than mine. I've only been able to love this place for about a year and a half, and you all have been loving on St. Anne's and experiencing this community for a long time. So for you to show up tonight and for you to honestly just give us feedback on what's your reaction to some of the things that you see today, it really means a lot. I absolutely love being pastor of this parish, and I'm really excited for us to move forward together in whatever way the Lord wills for us to move together. And so today are just some ideas on how we could maybe move forward together. Everything that you see tonight is what we would call kind of pre-schematic, which means nothing's decided and nothing's filled out in detail. Okay, so nothing you see tonight is something that's been decided or something that we're going to do or something that we have to do. It's all really up to the Holy Spirit. But we wanted to present something to you on what the future of St. Anne's could look like. So let's begin in prayer in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, thank you so much for our parish. Thank you for our history, for drawing us together into your love, into a community of faith. We thank you for our presence and so grateful to receive this moment in our history and our mission because of all those who have sacrificed and believed in what can be done here at St. Anne's. We ask you to send your Holy Spirit upon us tonight so that together we might imagine a future in which we fulfill the gift and opportunity, the sacred trust that you've placed in us here at St. Anne's. May we be your body, may we be your heart for all of our members and for this dear community that you've given us to love and serve. We ask that you give us a vision for growing together in faith as your family, and especially to serve our young people, their dignity and the glorious futures that you have in your mind and heart for them. So come, Holy Spirit, and fill the hearts of your faithful and help us to have a fruitful discussion tonight. We ask all this through Christ our Lord. Amen. St. Anne, pray for us. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. So tonight's presentation is really meant to be in the context of our overall pastoral priorities for the parish. So I've announced these at various different ways since I've been here, but what's really on my heart for St. Anne's, the number one thing is our Mass experience, okay, that we are worshiping God as deeply and as fruitfully as we can, and we're having the most compelling experience. As we worship, so as we believe, and as we worship, so we're transformed into the likeness of Christ. So really our worship and our Mass experience is the source and summit of everything that we do. And so I always want more people at Mass, and I want people praying more deeply at Mass, and I want them to have a transformative encounter with Christ as they come and celebrate Mass, because it's a beautiful tradition that we have. So the Mass experience is foremost in my heart. Also our membership experience, that people that belong to St. Anne's, that this is a place where they're able to express the deepest convictions of their heart, their faith, and the chance that they have to love God and to serve their community with all that they are. So our membership experience and growing in members as well is very important to me. I also want us to be growing as missionary disciples. That's the great call of Jesus, to follow him more closely and to play a greater role in his redemptive mission. So for us to grow in faith together, I also want this parish to be known for the works of mercy. And so Jesus said this will ultimately is how we will be judged, is what we did for the least of those in our community. And so I've seen wonderful growth in all of those areas. But the fifth pastoral priority is really our facilities. Do our facilities, do they sacramentalize, represent where our heart is and the true culture of St. Anne's, what we want St. Anne's to be known for? And our facilities, are they really helping us not only express who we are, but accomplish that great purpose that St. Anne's exists here for? And so when I arrived at St. Anne's, obviously we have a beautiful campus. We've got a great property in the heart of a really amazing neighborhood. We have an amazing opportunity to do good. But part of my experience was immediately I saw we have a preschool that is bursting at the seams and is over capacity and has, I want to say leaked over, but come over here into the church area and taken some spaces that used to be part of the big school, the Catholic school, the kindergarten area. We are seeing increasing demand for the YCC and people having really good experiences thanks to Kara and the great work your staff do here at St. Anne's. It's connecting a lot of people to St. Anne's, and it's a real benefit to our community. But it's bursting at the seams. It's in an old convent that wasn't built to be a preschool, and it's also kind of leaking out. So we could take even more space over here and convert it to preschool rooms if we had to do that. So it's taking a lot of space that was originally meant for the church's mission or for church meeting rooms or part of the school. So I think we have an opportunity maybe to address our preschool. When we look at our school as well, the school I think is doing very, very well, but we have an older building that I don't know that it's going to serve the educational needs of our families long term if it doesn't get some attention. I'd also like to grow enrollment in our Catholic school, and we have a great facility, but I'd like to maybe see us look at a different middle school, providing a different and new experience for our middle schoolers. Now our building kind of gives them the same traditional experience that they've had K through 5, but I'd like to see if we could create a space where they could have a better educational experience, and we can optimize our education for our middle school. But really, for us maybe to have more space, okay, to accomplish, education continues to change, and you need more space for special education, and you just can't cram the same number of kids in the old space in the old way and get the results that you want. So I want to look long term for our school as well, and also with our athletic field and facility. As you can see, I'm interested in making this the very best place for our young people to be. And to really emphasize, are we doing everything that we can to invest in our young people? Jesus says, let the children come to me and do not hinder them. The kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. Unless you turn and become like a child, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. So what you're going to see tonight is maybe looking at first investing in our youngest members and making sure that we are serving them optimally. And serving their faith formation and their growth optimally. And that would include our athletic facility. So we want St. Anne's to be the best place in my heart for our kids to come and play and grow and learn and to grow into the likeness of God, to be souls that magnify the Lord. So we'll look at opportunities for all of that. And then ultimately, I see opportunity in all these areas, and I also see opportunity for us in our worship space. We have a space that was expanded in 1967. It has served the community, I think, really, really well. My experience of the space is that it could be better. Could we get by with the way that our space is right now? Yes, we can. Do we have a space that I think fully raises our minds and hearts to God and gets us all moving toward a common destination? To build the kingdom of heaven and to glorify God with our lives. I don't know that we have the space yet that's as effective as I want it to be for worship. Part of that is there's challenges to the orientation of the space. There's parts of the space that are dated. There's parts of the space as well, I think, that don't tell the story of salvation. or the mystery of faith, the sacred mysteries that we participate in that transform us. I don't know that our building is telling that story and inviting us into that story as much as it could. So you'll also see some ideas tonight on what we could do with our worship space. It's all pre-schematic. And disclaimer, it's all really expensive. So I certainly, and change is hard. Change is hard, even considering change is hard. So I expect there to be emotions, strong emotions based on your experience of St. Anne's, your attachment to the spaces that we have, which run very, very deep. And I welcome those. I think that is great, great stuff to have. If you're excited about change as well, I want to hear about that and why you would be excited about trying to move forward. So whatever honestly you're feeling, that's what we want to earth in the town hall. As we move on from tonight, we want to kind of unearth, these are some things that we could do. How do you feel about them? Based on really your response tonight, we'll look at moving into a feasibility study. And what do we want to test based on the input that we've gotten so far? What do we want to test on what we could actually do? And from a feasibility study, it would indicate whether it would make sense for St. Anne's to move into a campaign and a phased campaign that would do certain things first and in order. So we're trying to sort all that out. So you're just going to get a bunch of stuff tonight. And thank you all for being here. I'm happy to introduce Tony Rohr. Tony's been a parishioner for a long time. He's worked on this parish. He's got a great heart for St. Anne's, a great feel for the people and for this mission. He works with Multi-Studio, and they've done campus planning for a lot of organizations and schools here in the area. They have a lot of expertise, and they've been really fun to work with on campus planning. Again, it's all pre-schematic. It's just ideas, just campus planning. So Tony, with that, I'm going to get out of your way, and thank you for being here tonight. I'll let you introduce your team and take us through the presentation.
Thank you, Father. I love the way you teed that up. Just a whole lot of ideas. Nothing's decided. Yeah, I've been my wife Kathy and I have been parishioners for a little over 30 years. All of our kids went to school here and had a great experience. So it's been very fun and challenging to think about what St. Anne's could be in the future as you all are thinking about being good stewards of the parish. And I think ultimately that's what fathers think about. How are we good stewards of what we have in order to make good decisions for how the parish can thrive into the future? So as we were thinking about how to put a master plan team together, the folks that I brought on our side were very specific to me because David Reed, Dave, wouldn't you wave, has spent his career working on education and has worked with different dioceses, different parishes in the city. He's worked with universities. So he has dedicated his career to understanding how kids learn and how teachers teach. So he is fantastic working with both teachers and facilitators and administrators and really trying to understand and staying in front of what education means into the future. Then I also have Matt Pally here, and Matt's been, you haven't worked any place other than with our firm, right? The only place you've worked with? Okay, well, to me, he's worked for us for a long time. We've worked together a long time. Matt just recently moved back to the Kansas City area, actually lives in Lawrence, part of St. John's Parish. He has given presentations before to different organizations around liturgical architecture. And so because I knew of that, and so when this first master plan idea came up, I went right to Matt and said, Matt, I really want you to get involved in helping us think about our worship space so we can present some ideas to Father Mitchell. So, and then last but not least is Darren Hyen. Darren, would you raise, many of you know Darren. We actually go back to our kids being in school together. In fact, we were just joking a little while ago that we first kind of knew each other because we got volunteered to coach our first grade daughters in CYO soccer. And that's where Darren and I both learned that there was something in soccer called offsides because we didn't know. The other coach came over and said, your girls are offsides. And I said, Darren, what's that mean? No idea what we're supposed to do with that. Anyway, so we've known each other a long time, and with Pierce Construction, they do projects like this all the time. So we thought this was going to be a really valuable team to be able to offer Father like some insights about construction costs, durations of costs. And so whenever we would meet, Darren was able to ask us questions around constructability and things we should be thinking about, both as a parishioner and as someone who does this all the time. So it's a great team that we're working on. So you're going to hear a little bit from all of us tonight in terms of this. There's 70 slides. I'm going to ask you to allow me to let us get through all of them. Save your questions, and then maybe we'll just do a line of questions at the very end. It'll be helpful just to kind of see it in sequence. And again, in case you hadn't heard, this is a master plan. This is a study of what can be done. This is nothing's been decided. I'm going to reiterate some of the things you're going to see in order to give you a sense of what could be. If we actually started working on one of these components, that's when we would really get into the specifics. What's it look like? Exactly how large on those things. But the things we're going to show you are accurate in terms of what could happen, okay? So, if I missed something, you guys let me know. So this is the process schedule that David had put together for how we've been working since last April and how we started working together, bringing us all the way to this point, because there's been a lot of information gathered. David will go through some of the meetings that have happened with the school, the YCC, in terms of the input we've received. And then a whole series of things. So there's been analysis, there's been review, there's been meeting with the city to make sure that anything that we were thinking of doing related to parking, traffic, et cetera, was going to be acceptable with the city, or that they didn't have any red flags. They haven't had any red flags. They've been great to work with. So we've been trying to just do all our due diligence, making sure we were thinking about different aspects of all the different things we're studying, because we're talking about everything from worship space to site to parking to traffic, stormwater management, fields, YCC, education. It's a big listing. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to David, because he's going to talk to us about some of the process and outcomes of working in the education space.
All right. Good evening. I'm going to come over to this side. So as you can see on the schedule, we've been at it for a while. We've been meeting with a lot of folks, but this is an important night for us. So we're really thankful for you all being here. Like Tony was beginning to lean into, we've done a lot of process. We've gained a really good understanding of what some of the needs are in more detail. We've got a lot of documentation that serves as the framework for the design, which can change, right? But it's not without basis from which we were starting design. As we embarked on the master plan, it's got essentially 5 components, basically every component on campus. Parking, church, YCC in the upper left is your current one, the school number 4, athletic fields number 5, rectory is number 6. We're really considering all of those to some degree. And the way the master plan is beginning to shake out, the big changes are that there's a proposal to relocate the YCC from that northwest corner of the parcel off of Mission Road and over to this area between a future developed athletic field and the school. And I'll get into more detail on some of the thinking behind that. This does give you a lot more parking in close proximity to the church as well. So helps solve some of the parking congestion that you have currently. So the proposed site development plan, again, aside from the YCC in a new location, other new kind of high-level components would be an addition to the school, which gives additional capacity and opportunities to kind of advance some of the thinking of how education is delivered. And then, as Father Mitchell explained, some of the PK classrooms that are in this part of the school, next to where we're at, move out to the YCC, opening up more classroom space so it begins to kind of categorize or compartmentalize some of the spaces with other like spaces in a nice way. So we're going to kind of run through this from YCC to school to church in that order. And as Father Mitchell kind of led into this, this is one of the critical needs in terms of capacity for the littles. So why the YCC? One of the key opportunities is capacity. So today, There are around 137 students. We're looking at designing for a capacity of 175. And that begins to tie into some capacity increases for the school to kind of continue that pipeline from the littlest kids on up to adulthood. Being in the old convent, there's a lot of safety and accessibility issues in the YCC that are challenging, to say the least, and sometimes kind of safety issues that CARE manages well, but would be easier in a facility designed for this purpose. Takes care of some traffic conflicts in the parking area by taking all the YCC traffic to the South Drive and really just creating purpose-built space. One of the things we were talking about the other day is that of all the parishes in your area, you're the only one with an early childhood center, so it's a real opportunity for your congregation. So the YCC kind of lays out as a two-story building. Again, you're landlocked. We want to make the best use of your acreage. So it's two-story. The orange spaces are your classrooms. The yellow are kind of more of your community spaces. We're working really hard, not only to just hit some of the baseline needs of an early childhood center, but as we talk to directors of early childhood around the region, one of the really critical needs is kind of a better transition from car to classroom, as these little ones are sometimes for the first time leaving home, leaving mom and dad. It's traumatic, and we want to create a really comfortable, positive experience for the little folks. And so we've got a really nice, generous garden that they transition to from the parking along the South Drive. We've got a very transparent, open, visible entry and lobby arrival, and then a real simple wayfinding layout in the facility itself. This sits right next to the existing playground and pavilion. It's got new dedicated early childhood play, a pavilion up here before we get over to the athletic field that's just off the drawing. So as we begin to think about what kind of architecture supports children from 3 to 5 years of age, we really want to be cognizant of scale and making sure this is a facility designed where they can see out. We're thinking about even the openings, the windows, in a way that supports seating or task surfaces or higher windows that bring light deeper into the classrooms. And so, you walk into this and it's purpose designed for our youngest children. And then we're also trying to think about what does it mean to tie into the existing St. Anne campus. This is the church, the school here, the entrance, the gym, and then the site for the early childhood center. And it's a mixture of brick and white stucco. And so we've kind of looked at a way to kind of hold on to that, at least the color palette, if not the materials. This isn't, the only way to kind of fit into campus. We're working on another early childhood center where it's distinctly different than the school, because the more home-like we can make it, the more familiar we can make it, the more comfortable it can be. But this is where we started. And you can begin to see how the play of windows, the transparency through the entry, this courtyard with some statuary, Jesus and the children, Mary, the crucifix. I mean, you're coming to a Catholic early childhood center. And hopefully it's one that's incredibly inviting and comfortable, offers protection from car to front door, and just very accessible. Your current early childhood center, it's hard to find the front door. And sometimes it's a bit of a trek to get from car to front door. So we want to make that whole sequence a lot easier for those families that are bringing their kids. And so beginning to kind of look at the spirit of what that courtyard might be and thinking about the rosary as a way to design the landscape and the hardscape. And the more time you spend in it, the more you recognize these symbolic elements of the Catholic religion, and that it can be a really easy, fun place to be, or it can be a more thoughtful and meaningful place to be, all at the same time. And just some quick imagery of what a lot of early childhood centers are looking like today. These are some samples from our projects. So we just want to make it even more desirable. I know you've got a high demand for it, but as we go to boost enrollment, we want to make sure it continues to be the preferred early childhood option in the area. So then we move to the school. Our goals for the school are somewhat similar. We're looking for adding an additional classroom per grade level, all the way from kindergarten through fifth grade, and then better amenities for middle school. So we're moving from a capacity of around 480 to 540. Some people have asked, well, why 540, why not bigger? A lot of that is really defined by the size of the parish boundaries and what we think a viable, optimal enrollment is, both for the draw of the area, but also just operating. So we can certainly kind of come back to any questions you might have. We're bringing, like I said earlier, the PK classrooms into the YCC, so we're opening up 4 classrooms into the school, so that gets us a long way toward 3 classrooms per grade level. We want to improve opportunities for faith formation. We want to keep St. Anne aligned with current education practices, and what that really means is helping kids be really college ready and career ready by the time they leave high school, and it all begins in the early age groups, because what they're going to be hitting in the workforce is a lot different than what we all entered into in the workforce when we came out of school. So that's what some of the other additional goals here are, is what are those necessary skills that they need to be successful. So we have gotten into some plan development for the school. There's a lot of improved security access and flow at the front door. There's a consolidation of your middle school program all in one place. We're bringing all your electives together for better efficiency and organization, and basically making a lot better use of the space you have. I mean, a lot of what we do in education is renovation. And there are a lot of really great opportunities for that. A lot of people think, oh, renovation, it's too bad we can't build a new school. We can do some amazing things renovating schools like yours. These are all renovation projects that we've worked on, and they're all achieving kind of similar goals to what we had listed and identified as kind of drivers for the school project.
Thank you, David. It's also worth noting that it was part of the YCC planning, the kind of site planning, that the YCC not being run on Mission Road is thought of from the staff as potentially like a really good thing, because they don't really want to necessarily be right on that busy street, and being more in the middle of the campus actually could be an advantageous thing. Also, from the standpoint of what we heard in terms of when are the worst kind of traffic times, a lot of times it's when, YCC kids being, parents parking, taking kids in, students being dropped off at the school, morning mass. And the parking lot can be really dicey in terms of navigating all that. So if you take the YCC and they're coming in from the east, then that kind of separates that traffic separately from the rest of the school and the church, so it could be a good thing. So, okay, we're going to go through, and before I turn it over to Matt, talk to you about some of the work we've been doing on the church and the worship space. And so, you've heard Father talk about some of his goals in terms of the aesthetics of the space, far more weddings in the environment, the altar being on the east for traditional worship and relationship in terms of facing east. And so we started looking at all those, how to make that work. And so we ended up with 3 different approaches, the way we wanted to study it. And we're going to spend most of our time talking about approach number 2 and approach number 3. So the way we broke it down in terms of options, a way of thinking about it, the first one we called refresh. Refresh would mean if you were going to spend money on the church where you didn't move the altar and you was just going to be some aesthetic improvements, paint, maybe some lighting, maybe fixing some pews, things like that, but it would not be a wholesale change. Approach number 2 is what we're calling remodel. We're going to show you what the intent of like something like that would be that would be a different look with the existing kind of framework of exactly what is there today. But it would move the altar, and so we're starting to understand what that means in terms of an entry sequence and how you move through the worship space. And then the third one is called renew. And renew came from looking at option 2. So as we were working on 2, we were kind of challenged by some of the things we were looking at that, we really haven't studied anything that kind of changes the dynamic of the worship space. And so you'll see what I mean when we go through that. So refresh, remodel, renew, redeem, and renew. And so the first one, this is a floor plan of exactly how the floor plan of the way the church is exactly today. And so with a refresh, we would be spending money on perhaps lighting, perhaps paint. There's some pews. I know I can't be the only one that's almost to pew over. If so, that's a bad thing, bad sign. And so this doesn't really move walls and things. It probably doesn't address anything with mechanical systems. It may with acoustics. So it would be the least costly thing to do. The second one is what is called remodel. Now, I got to back up. I got to tell you a little backstory here, because when we got started working on this, Father had already engaged a group called Conrad Schmidt out of Milwaukee. They do renovations of worship spaces all the time. That it's not all they do, but that is kind of one of the things that they're the specialty. They are artists and interior designers, and they help a parish or a church kind of rethink their historic space. Almost all of their projects are historic, what I'd call historic, very traditional worship spaces, traditional churches. Our 1963 addition to the church today is not a traditional worship space. It was part of Vatican II in terms of worshiping in the round. There's plenty of other facilities like that. What Conrad Schmidt has mostly worked on in terms of working with other parishes has been a more traditional center aisle kind of an approach. So they had already started working on some things. And so we put this up there so you could just see the flavor of some of the things that they have done. And so they took the work of the church, and they started thinking about a different way of applying color, art, lighting to the existing fabric of what we have today in our worship space. And so that is an illustration they created from that view, which is a current view of existing view of the church today, the worship space today. And then we did a diagram up there to say, okay, well, you're talking, and this moves the altar. So the altar's on the very east side. So hopefully you are all going to have the same problem I have right now. You are all going to go to Mass next week, and you're going to be going, wait a minute, he said, and that would be over there. Like, it's amazing how, like, I'm trying to pay attention, but I keep looking at beams and breakpoints, and so you can see that that end would be part of new altar, and then behind it would be the working sacristy. And so now you're thinking about how the west side becomes more important, the Mission Road side becomes more important because that's how you're processing into church. What I just said, processing into church from west to east is going to be important in some of the other things we're going to show you in a moment, because this thought process has evolved. So hang with us for a moment. So this it's a little washed out with the lighting, but this preserves the brick, and it preserves all the beams, and its applique of light and art, and what I would say a liturgical approach to color, because that's what Conrad Schmidt, it's very intentional in terms of the way they would think about that. And it has the altar in the east. So from that, a question was asked of us, like, okay, well, that doesn't change the kind of character inside. It deals with what we have, but you're applying color and texture and lighting you're not changing anything in terms of the structure of what we see. And somebody who's not here, but I won't call him out, but referenced it as a barn. I want to see something that doesn't have what I would. I don't even know where that is on this thing, and that was amazing. Okay. We can't see your beautiful face, Tony. Okay. Thank you. Okay, I did take that during Mass. I'm sorry, but I knew this was going to come in really handy, because we started studying, okay, well, how do you take this volume and what could you do differently within the structure what we have? And that's what we're going to show you is this third option called renewal, redeem and renew, which means we're not taking away from the structure, but we're going to do something inside of it in terms of the changed effect. So we're going to show you a couple illustrations of what that could look like. And then Matt's going to take you through an actual, because you can model this, and so we're actually going to take you into a model, and you can like walk around in the space. Okay, so one of the things about this space is you can see that top triangle. There are glulam beams that make this kind of pyramidal triangle. That's what the existing structure does, in two different directions. And the highest peak is right over where the altar is right now. So what we looked at was, okay, one of the ideas of renewals, we could hang a barrel vault underneath that structure. Still use the structure, but create a new volume underneath it. And what would that look like? And we studied a whole series of ways of doing that. And so that is one view of what you could do. We did not try to apply a lot of color to it. All we did try to do is look at form, in shape, in volume, of terms of the volume of that space compared to what you have right now. And so that view on the left is from the very center, and what we're showing in the very center is the baptismal font. So you're not at the back, you're at the center point. And what it does is it tries to focus more visual focus towards the altar than the other view did. It's trying to put more focus towards the east where the altar is. Now, in terms of the location of the altar, and then this is no different than what Conrad Schmidt had shown. This is almost the identical kind of orientation or relationship of altar to sacristy. Once we start really working on the actual design, there would be a lot of study into that specific area. We just shown what could be there. So when we did that, we actually took some of the drawings from 1963 of those glulam beams, and we started studying, okay, how do you actually hang something underneath there? And we actually would have to create some new soffits for that spring line to happen. And we did studies on what that material might be. And we just started scratching the surface in terms of how you could do that with engineers to figure out that, yeah, it could be done. So if you are in church and you see that soffit line that goes above the doors, that's this soffit line here. So we're talking about a spring line that's above that. And so this is, if you cut a section, if you cut the church in half and you looked at it through, this far east side is Mission Road. So this is where you're going to see some ideas around the idea of a new narthex, a new entrance from the west to go along with this entry experience from west to east. And you're seeing on the east side is where the new altar would be, with the sacristy behind it. And then where the altar is today, it becomes this transept where the baptismal font is. So that helps you understand that this vault goes both directions, because the volume goes both directions, and we preserve all the stained glass. The stained glass you're seeing in there is exactly what's there today. So we did not want to cover that up, and we didn't want to cover up the brick. But what we are changing is you're not seeing the barn effect of the beams above. So then we looked at it. So the view on the far left is if you're way at the back coming in, and the view at the right is if you're at the middle. And we started exploring what happens there to the ribs, you know, and then we had to stop because we were getting into too much detail. And this is a point in time. This is an idea, right? It's very different than what Conrad Schmidt. It's not better or worse. It's just different. But this is the time to look at this in terms of see how this applies to, is this the right thing to do? We even studied this in terms of, do we add columns? Because we didn't know exactly about how those arches would work. I don't think we need the columns. One thing that's important to remember for all these things, I should have brought it up, is moving the altar, and you'll see this in some of Darren's numbers, requires doing renovation down here, because the altar demolition is a little challenging because it's solid concrete and it has to be chipped out. And there's like this great myth that we can't do it or the whole world will spin off its axis or something because it's so. We can take the altar out. It's okay. We can do that. It's just going to require renovations down here to be able to accommodate that. And then we asked Conrad Schmidt, we said, well, let's have Conrad Schmidt, who was working all these issues with liturgical color and art, to look at what we did. And they came back and they started thinking like the application of color to the idea that we had provided in terms of this vaulted approach. And so and with some ideas around the backdrop of the altar and the crucifix and what you're focused on as a focus for worship. And it kind of goes, oh, now I got to go through this floor plan for a moment. We're going to get to you in a minute, really. You're doing great. Thank you. So what you're seeing to the left, labeled narthex, is we showed the ability to take the current, you'll see some drawings in this, the current kind of pointed wing that points out towards Mission Road off and create a new narthex, and along with that, potentially a new green room. Green room that could be attached to the existing cry room. What's the green room for? It would be a place adjacent to this new west entrance for weddings and funerals, and it could be used on Sundays. If you're going to have lots of weddings here, then this could be a fantastic brides and bridesmaids room in terms of to come out from with a limo parked out front, and or it's used for funerals, because in both cases you want to process from west to east. So that green room would be new construction adjacent to a new narthex, and you'll see more of what that looks like in a second. So when we first presented some of this area in blue right here is on the right. That's the current fellowship hall. That's exactly what we have right now. And then it goes past the pre-sacristy and the service sacristy in the little cafe. That's exactly what we have now. And you can see how it ties in. It comes down to the entrance that comes in from the north. That's exactly what we have right now. So what we did here in blue is showed the green room and the narthex in terms of its relationship. You would still have an entrance from the west like you do now. Hopefully we'd be able to improve that to some degree. I'm sorry, south, thank you. And so when we reviewed this, one of the great questions that came up on one of our first reviews, thanks Joe Meyer, was that, I called him out, didn't I? If we do a new entrance on the west and we have a fellowship hall in the east, they're not connected. The new narthex needs to be a narthex. It's not a fellowship hall, it's a narthex. So I said, Joe, I think we could do that. We haven't studied it, but I think we could make a connection between the two. And yes, we could make a connection between the two. So you could connect fellowship hall to green room, narthex on the west, so you could make that circulation work back and forth in terms of what's happening in the green room and what's happening in narthex with the fellowship hall we have, all on that level. So therefore, you have the access to the elevator and cafe and all those things. So yes, that can be done. Okay, so when you take, this is the floor plan with the seating layout, not unlike what Conrad Schmidt had laid out, and this works for the capacity we need. And if you lay over the top a ceiling plan, so remember the vaults going two different directions? That's what's colored in blue here. That's the width of the vault based on those illustrations we showed you. The area in gray would be the flat ceiling areas on the edges of it, and then these corners are going to be exposed up so you can see up to this, so you can see up to these stained glass in the corners. So this shows, now I'm superimposing the ceiling on top of the floor plan. So now you can see if I'm seated here, I'm underneath the dome. I'm underneath the vault. Does that make sense? So what we're doing here is just showing the relationship of the ceiling opening volume to the seating plan down below. So this is easier for us to understand than people who don't look at these every day. So that's why we're going to show you this model in a minute, and you can put yourself there. So this is just an update of that idea. This kind of section, in this case, the west side's Mission Road, the east side is the east altar, and you can see these are exactly the stained glass windows we have today. And then Conrad Schmidt took that same view, and they started thinking about applying color. So again, this is Conrad Schmidt thinking liturgically correct color art along with what we're trying to look at and study architecturally. And so we're working together on this, and so this is the work that they did to complement the work that we were doing, and then their view of what new altar backdrop could look like. This is a first look. There hasn't been a tremendous amount of detail. Father, you probably haven't given them a lot of feedback yet, but this is like a first pass at what that space could look like in terms of transformationally the point of view for worship. And then there would be work that would be done related to the chapel, related to art and color as well. So they were asked to look at that at the same time. I think we're about ready to go. Yeah, before I get into this, because I'm going to go through this entry sequence. Remember I was talking about new narthex? That narthex ID you're going to see removes that little nun's hat wing. That's the best explanation we have for it. We'll show you what that could be after we go through this model, because I want you to see what the interior of the worship space could be like viewing this kind of model.
I got my own mic. That's cool. All right, I'm going to walk you through this. I apologize for anybody who gets motion sick. I'm going to try to take it nice and slow. One thing that Tony might have left off is that the reason Conrad Schmidt is portraying a lot of blue in the stars on the ceiling is because what the point of liturgical art and architecture is supposed to do is to remind us, what the point of the blue sky and the stars up above is to remind us that during Mass we are joining with heaven and we are awaiting the new Jerusalem and the new earth. So altars are always oriented towards the new Eden, towards Jesus Christ, and the stars represented in all of these cathedrals are representing when Jesus comes again, heaven and earth will be perfected. And so it's to remind us that Mass is a little bit of heaven, and we are just trying to participate in that through the Eucharist. So I'm going to walk you through here. We just entered from the west. What did I drop? And we're walking in towards the center. The center is being the baptismal font. The baptismal font is where we all entered into our faith, where we all became Christians. I'm going to take a look at the left. This is back towards the fellowship hall, and there's the organ pipes. And look towards the right, towards the south entry. And then if we look back to the back, you'll see, while it's not the exact stained glass windows because that's really hard to get that kind of detail in here. You can see that we preserve the stained glass windows because they're quite beautiful. And then we walk up towards the altar. Now note the furniture here, this is just placeholder, just like everything. This is just a master plan. But you can imagine that this would orient you during Mass towards Jesus and towards the Eucharist and keep you a little bit more focused. Now, one of the questions is always like, oh, well, will I be able to actually see what's going on and everywhere? I don't like sitting in the front. I'm Catholic. I like sitting in the back pew. Well, we did think about that as we were putting in these ceilings. So I'm just going to walk back to the back. I've got 3 kids. I've got a child under 2. I know exactly what this is like. I've got to escape. And you can see that even in the back, you can still see the orient. This is probably the worst seat in the house, and you can still see the altar, the presider's chair, the ambo. And then you can also see as we walk around here how we're using the idea of exposing the ceilings to bring back height up to the top and being able to see the full height of those stained glass windows. And we even did a little bit of thinking about how your Eucharistic procession would handle, where would your extraordinary ministers stand, which direction would you walk in. But again, we would get into this in more detail in schematic design. Tony, anything you want me to show before we move on?
So the first, we really found that helpful to understand it versus just the drawing, so I hope it helps you as well. So when we were looking at, okay, there's a thread here of we have, this idea of YCC moves, we have a place for new parking. The new parking is closer to this entrance than any other parking we have because we're right up against Mission Road. One of the complaints, comments given to us was that this wasn't as enriching of an entrance as we probably would like to have. And could we explore addressing this western, if we're going to want to bring people here, what could we do to enhance the Mission Road experience and the way we look as a Catholic community to Mission Road and the rest of the community? And so we studied creating a new entrance narthex that would be 2 stories high, that would fit into the profile of the roof lines without the kind of flying wing, and also think about creating drop-off areas, but not necessarily a bunch of parking along here. When I say think of this as an auto court out in front of the narthex, an auto court is someplace, because most days, if many of us are processing out on the west, this is going to be filled with pedestrians on a Sunday morning after services. It would also be the ideal place to park a hearse for a funeral or limousines for weddings. It would be like an auto court for the new narthex. And so the new narthex then also has this connection to that green room I was talking about, so it can all be done inside. This just shows the relationship of narthex going all the way north to handicap parking, and then the new parking lot to the north of all that. This also shows the idea, we're creating a colonnade in this idea. This is a colonnade that connects from narthex, so the colonnade stays at pedestrian scale, and then the idea is that that colonnade could extend down further north all the way to that new parking. Now, it's important to note that this new entrance and that colonnade don't have to be adjacent. They don't have to come along with the worship space renovation. You could do this later. You could do it separately. It's not, we're thinking about this in terms of how does these renovation projects potentially happen. So you could do this with or without what we just explored inside. I want to make sure that's clear. So we were looking at the relationship again of coming in from the west, proceeding into the experience you just saw three-dimensionally. And so if you took that colonnade all the way to the north, you could have this colonnade experience as a walking experience, shade, out of the rain, connecting the parking, that new parking that would be down on the north end, up to that new entry experience. And that would be a dramatically different kind of expression of the church on Mission Road for sure. It does tie in terms of a midpoint to exactly where the parking lot, where the sidewalk is today that goes into the entrance by the chapel. So that's what that break is. That break in the middle that pops up and says, you know, that is the point where the sidewalk takes you into the chapel. So it picks up that language that already exists on the site. And of course, this is just to help you in context of what we have today out there. All kinds of landscaping opportunities. This does not show that auto court very well. We did not get a chance to really advance that. So I expect to be a lot of questions about that coming up in terms of all the issues around the narthex and the colonnade and that circulation experience. It was also thought about from the standpoint of, if this part of the colonnade is attached to that green room, that's really interior space that you would use all during the week. The rest of it is colonnade. But this would be an amazing experience for a bride. In, you know, pre-wedding photographs, approach, father, very cool processional into the experience into the church. Okay, David, I can wrap it up. Okay, so we took a look. Remember when David went through where the YCC was? Remember the YC? That was like a long time ago in this presentation. Just could try to come back to it. That's the edge of the YCC right there, what we were talking about. And this was that green space we were talking about in terms of kind of a St. Anne's Catholic courtyard green garden experience as you come into the YCC. Because the YCC's got all kinds of playgrounds experiences. That front court is intended to be, you know, a reflective, you know, a Catholic identity garden as you walk in every day. This is the adjacency to the idea of a new football and soccer combo field where the outdoor field is today, and it does fit. The best way to think about this is if you've driven by Indian Hills Middle School, Mission Road and 63rd. It's a great example. It's fenced. It's used all throughout the year. Tremendous use on that piece of property. And so there would have to be some retaining wall issues happening here because of the grade really slopes up to the street. But that parking down to the south is exactly what you have today. It's important to note that these dash lines on the going catty corner across there are stormwater issues from the city. So everything we've done, we've tried to incorporate what we know of in terms of utilities crisscrossing the site from the city. And then, and the other thing is that because of, if we have a new YCC, it has a little kitchen space. It would be really easy and convenient with a new pavilion that you could do outdoor. You would have access to restrooms for the fields, and you'd have access, you could go out and do picnics, and you'd have access to a kitchen and things for concessions for the fields, which would be a nice thing in terms of all the parents and the kids out here on a weekend, because this would get heavily used. And then the last piece of this was that there could be a new pavilion out here that could be dedicated kind of, if you don't want to use the YCC, you could create a pavilion. We've done this before, a pavilion with water and restrooms that could be dedicated for all that outdoor play. So you're not running people into the school or opening up the school for weekend things. Okay. I'm going to invite Darren up here. Because they're going to throw things at us. Should be both of us. So what we did, I should just let you talk.
Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, good luck reading that. I wanted you to see that and then back off of it before you take a photograph of it, because there's a tremendous amount of work that's gone into all the aspects we could think of in terms of related costs for anything. For example, if you do a worship space renovation, where do you worship for 12 months of construction? And so we've thought about, okay, we'd probably be spending some money in the gym to make the gym a worship space for a while. So that kind of sequencing of, we got to spend some money here to be able to do that thing has been thought about in all those spreadsheets. And the really nice thing is that this is what Darren does and his team all the time. So it's based upon real numbers and which gives us great guidance and comfort in what we're looking at.
Thank you. My name is Darren Hyan. My wife Lauren and I have been parishioners for, 35 years now. All three of our kids have gone through St. Anne Catholic schools as well as Miege. And I'm actually a licensed architect. I left architecture to go into construction because I had just such an affinity for the building side of things. I was blessed 3 decades ago to actually get into church construction. So I get to use my architectural experience every day with what we do, and I'm thrilled to do it for our parish. But my job was to come in and, I often say this to architects because I am one, they get to do all the fun stuff and all the pretty pictures, and I got to bring reality to it to tell them what it's going to cost. I got to show them, how do you build that? So that's really the role that we play. So as contractors, we're spreadsheet geeks. So we spend a lot of time talking about construction, constructability, how do you put this thing together? How are you going to make that barrel vault stand up? How are we going to build that YCC? So we're constantly evaluating different types of construction systems to build these buildings economically, efficiently, and with good quality. We want to be incredibly good stewards with all of your money, and we don't take that lightly. So we spend a lot of time developing project cost. So we've taken that master plan, it's very pre-schematic, as Father mentioned, but we start to break this down into a number of different pieces. So Tony and David and Matt and his team have shown you kind of, hey, here are the 6 major components. Well, we blew that up even more so that you could see what each individual component cost. As Tony said, we do a lot of research into what does the construction piece cost. But you have to remember there's a lot more to all of these projects than just the construction component. So we talk a lot about construction. We call that hard cost. We also talk a lot about soft cost. This spreadsheet that you see here takes all those different components and we pull this apart. So Tony referenced the YCC, the parking, the fields, all the different options for the sanctuary, the colonnade that he talked about, renovation to the parish hall. What are we going to do in the gym as we're worshiping for over a year in there while we're doing the work in the gym? And we start to pull that apart. And we can certainly come up with very, very good construction numbers. But we also have to talk about the other costs that the church is going to have to do this, and they're called soft cost. Things like design and engineering fees, things like furnishings, all the chairs, things like liturgical artwork and statuary. All of those things have to be considered as we look at overall project cost. So we don't want to just talk about, well, the sanctuary is going to cost X amount of dollars to build, because there's also a large number in addition to that that we have to consider. So we take all those massive spreadsheets and we come up with just a simple executive summary. Again, it's not really designed for you to read each one of these, because we're going to show you some conceptual ranges of what these overall project costs look like. So first of all, we're going to go through each one of those different components, starting with the sanctuary. There's been a lot of talk about refresh, remodel, renew. As you start to look at that refresh option, construction costs are about $4 million. You know, Tony said, hey, a little bit of carpet, some paint, some lights, it's not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal, because it's a lot of finishes on the floor. There's a lot of lighting, there's AVL systems, there's room acoustics we have to deal with. So even in a refresh scenario, you're still going to spend significant amount of money on the sanctuary itself. What's interesting about it is you've got roughly $4 million of construction costs, but you also have soft costs of about $3.7 million. Now, a lot of that is in pews, probably $500,000 to $600,000 of that is in seating in that room, but a large majority of that soft cost is actually the Conrad Schmidt piece that Tony spoke of. That liturgical art, the colors on the ceiling, very high quality components that go into that room to give it that new look. But again, all things in, we start to look at the cost of construction, soft cost. We're always thinking about some sort of a project contingency, because as we have said many times, and I'll say it again, this is pretty schematic, we want to start talking about cost ranges. So that refresh option for the sanctuary can be anywhere from $8.5 to $9.3 million. Construction cost, it's also important to start thinking about the construction duration, I should say. To design something like that is probably going to take anywhere from 6 to 8 months. So there's a quite lengthy design phase that we're going to go through. Permitting with the City of Prairie Village is going to take about 2 months for that particular project. Construction is going to take about 8, and then Conrad Schmidt would need about 4 months in that room to do all of their artwork and furnishing in the space. So all in, 22 months for that project. So about a 2-year process if you said go today. Now, one of the things we do with all of our cost estimating is we're trying to equip the parish, the leadership of the church, so that they can start to make informed decisions and prioritize what our highest priorities are. So we're going to show you actually 3 options for the sanctuary itself. The second one is the remodel component. And again, the primary difference here is this is where we would take the altar and relocate it to the east end of the church. And as Tony said, the earth does not stop spinning, but we do have to get into this space extensively, because when we tear that out, we've got to build new structural floor across the sanctuary so that we can actually put the pews in where they're scheduled in the design. What's interesting about this particular project is the construction costs go up, as you would expect. Jumps to about $6 million. The soft costs are about the same, around $4.1 million, with a contingency brings that particular project to about $11 to $12 million. Notice the construction duration, it changes dramatically. It takes more time for us to build that particular space, as well as it takes longer for that design process. So again, option 2, 11 to 12 million, roughly 29 months for construction. The renew option is interesting. Construction costs do jump again, up to about $8 million for the construction piece, but about 3.5 for the soft cost. This barrel vault ceiling actually simplifies the work that Conrad Schmidt would do in the room, which drove that number down a little bit. But again, anywhere from $13 to $14 million for that particular piece. Notice again, the duration goes up even longer, because it's going to take longer to build that barrel vault versus leaving, as Tony said, that barn structure in place. The important thing about all 3 of those is you start to see the order of magnitude between refresh, remodel, renew. So now we're not talking about the overall cost, we're looking more at the delta between the two and what importance that design change has for us as a parish. So other things we talked about, kind of staying on that sanctuary theme, Tony referenced that colonnade, the new narthex and the colonnade there on the west end of the building out on Mission Road. That particular piece is about $2.3 million. Soft cost obviously come way down because we're not dealing with the liturgical art and statuary on that particular piece. And again, that brings that to around a $3 million project and about 14 months total from start to finish, but construction's only going to be about 6 months. Tony also referenced that colonnade extending further to the north and even to the east so that it connects to the north parking lots, much smaller scale for that particular piece of the colonnade, which ends up being about a $2 million piece, about the same length of construction as well. Father also mentioned wanting to renovate the chapel slightly from more of a liturgical art perspective as opposed to construction. Very little construction cost, but Conrad Schmidt could go in and refresh that to make it more along the theme of what we're talking about doing for the sanctuary. So a little less than $1 million could be spent in there. The Young Child Center. This is about a 25,000 square foot facility. It's significantly larger than what we have because we're planning for additional students and future capacity. The construction of the Young Child Center is about $11.5 million. Soft cost would be about 1.7, bringing that total project in that $15 million range to relocate the YCC. And again, it's important to note how this would be sequenced because you've got about 12 months for design, you've got a period of time for permitting, and then about 12 months to build that. Once the new YC is built, then you would go and tear down the old one and then build the parking lots. That particular parking lot to the north, as Tony talked about, has construction costs of about $1 million, soft costs of about $2 million, so it's anywhere from $1.2 to $1.4 million. Again, construction's only going to take 3 to 4 months to actually tear that down and build the new parking lot when that's done. You really need to do the YCC in the north parking lot as a single project. Artificial turf athletic fields. There is space out there with the use of a few retaining walls to build that artificial turf field, full football. Those fields typically cost about $2.4 million. That's going to be all the under drainage, the subgrade, the artificial turf, fencing around the perimeter, athletic equipment, all that would be included for about $3 million. And those typically take anywhere from 5 to 6 months to build from start to finish. And then the athletic pavilion, again, this would be some sort of an outdoor structure, which could have restrooms, storage for equipment. All-in costs on that is about $1 million. And then finally, the school piece. The school we broke into 2 different categories. One is a partial renovation. David referenced we can do a lot with renovating existing school structures. We have excellent bones on that school. Horrendously expensive to tear that down and rebuild. And what do you do for 2 years if you're building a new school? So that's really not on the table. We talked about it briefly, but we came back to a simple renovation project. You could renovate a vast majority of the school for about $5 million with soft cost as far as furnishings and contingencies, probably a $6 to $7 million project. And that would probably have to be phased. Obviously, a lot of that would be done over a summer. Some of that could be done when students were actually in other parts of the building as well. But again, about 16 months from start to finish for that partial renovation. The other piece is to develop that 2-story middle school component, which would come directly off the north end of the existing school. That's about 15,000 square feet, and total project cost on that is around $8 million. And again, that would take roughly 12 months to build from start to finish. So that's me giving you all that and drinking through a fire hose. So that's a lot of information to digest. But what do we do with all of that? And I think this is really the important component. As everyone has talked about tonight, none of these decisions have been finalized. It's now time to take all that information, your feedback, and we can start to group these different projects together. When we made this presentation to the parish council, I'll call Joe Myers out again. Why not? You know, he said, hey, what's it going to cost? All in, what's it going to cost? Well, it's kind of an unfair question because you would never do all of it at one time. These campuses are typically built in phases. A lot of it depends on feasibility studies. What's our ability to raise money? We also have to start to evaluate what are our priorities? What are our main ministry objectives? And one of the things we're going to try to figure out is how do you group all this together? Well, you guys have just seen a whole lot of numbers. Some of you are taking pictures. Some of you are writing this down. I'll save you the trouble. What we did is we went in and we started to kind of group these together. We're not phasing this yet. We're just kind of grouping these together. And we looked at, what if we put the Young Child Center, the parking lot, and some interior renovation to the existing church as a group? And that number comes out to be about $20 million. And depending on how you group those things together, it's probably about 18 months for construction for all of those. The middle column shows the school athletics facility and the chapel. Again, when you group all those together, it's about a $20 million project. And the last piece is the sanctuary and the colonnade, and possibly a minor renovation to the sanctuary to help improve Father's residence for better group activities over there. That piece, ironically, is about $20 million. So what's interesting to look at is, what do those costs look like in 2026? But we all know we're not going to do this now. You've all seen schedules where these take 18 to 24 months to put together. So we also start to put a factor of construction inflation onto these numbers to say, hey, if that project is $20 million today, in 3 years, that project becomes $22 million. So as we start to think about feasibility studies and how we're going to look at this, we're going to start looking at projected numbers into the future. So that's a lot of information in a short period of time. But hopefully that gives some validity to the design you've seen tonight, as well as what potential costs could look like.
Good. Thank you to all the guys that presented tonight. Thank you. Can we give them a round of applause for their really hard work on this project? Okay, now we're going to turn the lights on and I'm going to leave. This. No, we want to have some time to get some input. So why are we here tonight? I do think that now is a good time to consider investing in the mission of St. Anne's. I do think there could possibly be momentum, there could be interest, there can be opportunity, there can be resources that people would be willing to give to enhance the mission of our parish. So I'm really committed to finding out if that's true, and this generation at this time looking at doing something really special to invest in the mission of St. Anne's. I do think there's a great opportunity. I'm convicted about trying as best we can. So going on from tonight, we will ask for feedback from the entire parish. So we have a sampling of people here tonight. Everybody will be invited to look at this presentation, either the video or the slide deck, give us their input. Okay, and taking all that, then we'll look at, okay, do we want to engage in a feasibility study about what would we actually do and what would we do first and why, and start testing about what's actually possible. Could there actually be the resources out there to actually make some of this happen? And even to be creative, are there different ways to fund this? Does this have to come strictly from donations, or are there other ways that we could possibly finance or get the resources to get some of these projects done? So we want to hear from everybody, as many people as possible at this phase before we go into feasibility. If the feasibility says that we would be able to do something, then we move into capital campaign. And could that happen in 2026? Yes. Yeah, possibly. Could it not happen in 2026 because we still have a lot of questions to answer and a lot of things to figure out? Yes, that could also happen. So tonight, we do want to hear from you, and I'm really honest about that. I do want to hear from you. Tonight is really about trying to mine some higher level emotions and responses. So based on your experience and your conviction, do you think that was a good idea, or do you think that that's a really bad idea? Or if you have a question, why did you do that? Did you think about doing this? Tonight's not really a night to ask questions about details. I'm sure our team would be happy to answer those, but those aren't going to be most helpful to us. So trust that if there are details to be figured out about this small component or this component, we'll work those out. Long term. But tonight is more about, okay, did you like it? Did you didn't like it? Do you think that was a great idea? Do you think that's a terrible idea? Is the priority, do you think, right? Or do you think the priority should be something different? Again, based on your experience of St. Anne's and your conviction. So I hope that makes sense, and I'm going to turn it back over to you guys to mind the comments, if you would. And do people want to line up to make comments, or do you want us to come to you? They all have to be on the mic because this is being videoed and other people will be able to hear the responses.
Okay, all right, you've got the slideshow then. Okay, all right.
I love the plans for the early childhood.
Please, can I get you to stand up and face the camera and speak into the mic?
Where
Thank
is
you.
the camera?
Oh, it's up there somewhere.
I love it. Okay, I love the plans for the early childhood center. Much needed, and we obviously need the parking space on that north side. I have two objections to the plan to move the altar. The first and most important is most of the parishioners at Mass would be much further from the altar in these new plans. Much, much further, where now we're gathered around. And the second thing, I really hate to lose that baptismal center. We have a unique baptismal center, wonderful artistic mosaics. I'd love to retain them.
Thank you.
I think it'd only be fair for Joe Myers to ask a question.
Yes, the team is available to answer your questions as well. So.
There we go. Okay, well, Father asked for a reaction of emotion, and mine is, I'm thinking about the people who sat in this room in 1965 and what they looked at for the vision for where we are today. And I want to be here a long time, and I want my kids to be here, and I'm really excited about this.
I will walk to you if you don't want to walk up to the front.
My concern is that we need to have a detailed plan on financing long-term. What's going to be done now, what's going to be done later, and what kind of money is going to be needed. And I mean, serious plan, not the level you've talked about here.
I just want to reiterate what Mary said, at least the first part. I think the Young Child Center is definitely a priority. Now, I don't know if it's possible to just do one part of the plan, if that's feasible economically, or if you want to throw in an athletic field, if that would be better, or whatever. But I think the Young Child Center is definitely, should be the top priority.
I think I agree with all of that as far as the Young Child Center. If we were going to do this in 1, 2, 3, 4, I think that should be number one, because that solves the parking problem. And I think as you come and go in the mornings with all the children back and forth, and I think it's much needed to be much safer for everyone.
Right there.
I'd just like to say that I'm really impressed with all of the options as far as renewing the worship space. I think the remodel would be worth it more than the refresh because they're so close in cost. And I think the remodel would give us a much more usable and more beautifying result. But, oh, if we could do the renew, it's awesome. Unfortunately, I probably won't be here to see any of this. But I agree that the YCC is a priority. And I think we need the refresh of our worship space. I think that would be so uplifting to all of us, to everybody in the parish. And so I'd like to see us move forward with that as soon as possible, whichever option is there.
Yeah, one thing I would want to address and reiterate is we showed you some groupings. That is not what we're proposing for phase. This list of projects you see on the left and all of those costs, we can arrange those and prioritize those any way we want. If we identify that the YCC is the highest priority, that can go on the list. And if the next priority is let's do a simple remodel of the sanctuary, those can be grouped together. This is by no means saying we're looking for a $20 million project. This is simply to identify what some of those costs could be to tackle some of those projects. Things like the YCC. Maybe that building gets a little smaller, maybe gets a little bigger. We don't know yet. We will study that, and there will be detailed costs on everything that we look at. The sanctuary. You know, there's a wide range of costs and design elements that we can put into the sanctuary. All of that will be studied. This is conceptual to see an order of magnitude. Because if an order of magnitude said the YCC was 5 million and the church was 20, you might think about things differently or flip that around. What if it was the opposite of that? You may reprioritize what our ministry need is. So this is simply a master plan exercise. And we want you to understand that. We're trying to identify the order of magnitude, not the exact cost for each project right now.
So I know there's going to be a feasibility study on all of it, but I think obviously all of it looks great. So, Father, if we're going to do it all, what do we need to get the project jump-started? And then what can the tuition, our current, donations, service from a debt standpoint if we needed to take it? And also, we never saw the whole new pool renovation for your house. So kind of want to see the rectory.
Did we not? We left that slide out. We didn't get to see the new rectory. That was a huge mistake. I'm sorry that happened. So happy to answer that. But first, you all will be asked to fill out a survey. And during that survey, you'll be able to rank the priority of what you think is the most important of everything that you saw. I think it's broken into 5 or 6 components. So a lot of the feedback that you're giving, you'll be able to give that in the survey as well. So the financial model for the diocese, so they require, before you do any campaign, they require you to have a feasibility study showing what you can raise. And that usually is a survey of the parish, the majority, and personal interviews with potential top donors is how that process goes. And so that has to be completed. And then if they green light a capital campaign, for any phase, you have to have 50% of the cash in hand before you can move any dirt. So you can design all you want, but you can't move any dirt until you have 50% of the cash in hand. The only exception to that would be if they would let us finance, for example, the YCC, and we have a financial model for the YCC where it could service its own debt. So normally, all of our ministries are break even. We work on a break even kind of budget with everything. So we don't require any ministry necessarily to turn a profit right now. But if we would require the YCC to operate on a model where it could service its own debt, we could approach, the diocese and see if they would let us borrow that money. But I don't have an answer to that because we're too early on. But normally speaking, the feasibility study would have to show that you could raise that money for that phase, and then the capital campaign would have to be successful. 100% of the money has to be pledged and 50% cash in hand before you can move dirt. So what can you do? If they call you for an interview, take an interview. Or if I call you for an interview, take an interview. So that's how the process is going.
During typical church renovations, where would the stuff that we have already, the pews and all of the stuff that's existing, would that be donated to a newer church somewhere else? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it would be ideal. This is the harsh reality of church renovation work. It would be awesome if someone wanted to come and get those pews. We would be extremely fortunate if someone even wanted them. Unfortunately, they do end up in the landfill when a lot of this is done. So we would try to find a home for those pews if we could, but 9 times out of 10, they end up going away. And ours are in pretty rough shape, as most of you know. So we've gotten our money's worth out of those pews that are there now. Does that answer your question? That was something we'd look at, that stone and marble on the altar. We'd see if any of that could be repurposed. We would certainly try to do that. If it couldn't be repurposed, I'm sure we would try to find a home. That is valuable material. I'm sure someone would want some of that material, so that would probably get repurposed.
I think we're also considering reusing the altar and moving the actual altar.
Yeah, we could reuse a lot of that on the new East Altar location as well.
I'm wondering what is the feeling of the parish, the parishioners, for getting rid of the round altar. I agree with Mary that this is putting the people farther away. The little kids can't see like they can now in the circle. I don't know where, I think it's a step backwards to get rid of the round. I think I'm in favor of new floor, new pews, and leave the altar where it is.
I agree with this young lady. I do like the roundness of the church where everyone can see. I'm a huge fan of repurposing, if we can repurpose what we can. The other thing is we do need the Young Child Center needs to be redone. I didn't know if this was discussed, if like the junior high, the 7th and 8th graders, a separate space should be for them since they're older and have different responsibilities, and then maybe the YCC can move in with the main school. I didn't know if that was an option. And then the other thing I would say is, not to be negative, I do not like redoing the field. Number one purpose and reason for me is it's very toxic. It's very costly. You have to redo it every 10 years. I think God, Earth is great being on the ground. I think that's kind of important. I don't know. I don't like the redoing the whole field. I like that we can have baseball. There's also bathrooms down by a park down over there, so I don't know if we need to make bathrooms. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but that's it. That's all I have. But very beautiful plan overall.
Yeah, just a quick response to the middle school. We are planning that middle school be co-located together on the lower level. So 6th, 7th, and 8th is all together. There's a cluster of electives by there. That whole zone might have a different vibe, a little more upscale. This is requests that we get from a lot of private schools is middle schoolers need to feel like they've moved on and moved up and need a place of their own. So yes to that.
Okay. I just want to say thank you. I think that having the visual is extremely, extremely helpful, especially being able to see different options and hearing some of the thought processes behind why the windows are the way they are in the YCC, et cetera. I think that's extremely helpful, especially when you're embarking on a large undertaking. I agree with everyone who's saying that the YCC is a huge priority. I think that it is a really great entrance to bring more people to our church. I know of multiple families who put their children in the YCC just because it was a full-time option, drove a little bit of ways or whatnot, and then had such a fantastic experience that they stayed for kindergarten and on, or even converted to the faith, I think that the YCC is a really wonderful option for that. My only one concern and one just kind of point. My point for the YCC is just thinking through logistics of drop-off, especially for parents who have kids that have YCC children and big school, where the drop-off, or more so pickup, I guess, times, how you flow that through. And also, if you're moving the YCC, you're going to end up with more people dropping off on that south side versus the north side. But the north side now would have more space. So just kind of thinking through how we utilize those parking spaces along the field while still allowing those parents to get out and back through the line without ending up with a huge line down Windsor. I think completely can be figured out, but just something to keep in mind. I'm just thinking through logistics myself. And then my only concern with the YCC is just the exterior. My worry is just especially when we look at our church right now and we worry that it looks a bit dated, I do feel like that exterior looks like in a few years we'll think it looks dated. So I don't know if there's a way to change that exterior to look a bit more traditional or just more matching with the bigger school while still keeping those awesome features for the new way that children learn.
Father, thanks for bringing this together, first of all, and all the discussion and planning that went into this. I'm curious just how you're thinking, or should we be thinking about future planning? So this is a snapshot today of future vision. How do you guys think, especially in the education focus, how are you guys thinking about even the future needs, like for technology, safety, security? Is that being worked into the future soft costs, or how are you guys thinking about that as part of the planning?
Short answer is yes, that's all being considered. Part of it is technology, part of it is some replanning of the front entry and front office for that secure access into there. Everything at this high level of master plan accommodates any of the technology needs that we might need. We often talk about the future of teaching and learning is not all about technology. A lot of it's about hands-on, real-world learning, project-based learning, doing stuff with our hands, doing real stuff. All of that is accommodated in this plan, and all of that can be factored into Darren's numbers. So yeah, we can take care of it.
I'm going to back up to Mary Catherine's question. We actually studied a number of different kind of aesthetic looks of what we had to I was the one that was stop. We're not designing we're just showing what the YCC could be. Yes to all that in terms of the aesthetics. Because we started having this great dialogue in our office about trying to match what parts of the school are you trying to match in terms of color and brick, but also how these playful windows could be expressive of YCC. So yes to all that. They'd love to dive into that, but we had to just finish the master plan for now. I think the traffic issues around, it would be really great to study what are those peak times, both in terms of school and YCC together, and how does the new parking on the north help the school, and how does that location jive with the school. I don't know that we can answer that right now, quite frankly.
So thank you for the creativity and thought leadership. This is really exciting, and the willingness of the parish to create a better worship and Catholic community experience for us. I'm very respectful of the comments that people have made about the altar. That said, I'm a big proponent of changing the orientation of it. I would very much like to see a more traditional Catholic worship experience. And I have to think that it's going to improve the acoustical situation from what we have right now. I mean, that has been re-engineered over and over and over again. I still can't hear the Mass half the time. So, thank you.
Yeah, concerning the acoustic, I didn't hear a word about the position, what happens to the organ in all those changes. It's it's very easy to completely mess up the acoustic of a church. And transporting the organ to another position would cost a lot of money.
Do you want to talk about choir and organ and?
So the organ pipes and the actual would stay right here in the scheme that we had laid out. We would just have to move the actual console of the organ in this situation, in the extreme one, yeah.
But nothing was said about the choir. Where is the choir?
Up here, right here. Yes, yes. So essentially on this side we have extra pews, this side we remove pews enough, and we would, in the design phase, figure out if that's the right place acoustically, if that's where the choir even wants to go, and if we have enough room there. So we'll work through that in the phase, but that's where we've proposed that would be. So still up towards the front, but not the center of attention, yeah.
Acoustical studies part
Yeah, that's a great point. With any solution that we would come up with the worship space, we would have an acoustical engineer helping us with the acoustics of whatever solution we do. It's going to be necessary with a new with a new audio plan. Sorry.
I just want to say thank you. I think the plans are amazing. This is really exciting. The first thought I had is like, when can we start? But I agree that, you know, it is nice to have the altar where it is, and thoughts with the little kids having access and, you know, being close to the altar. However, I grew up going to the cathedral downtown, the Immaculate Conception, very traditional orientation. It's beautiful. Change is hard, but I think this is great. So I just want to say thanks for the thoughtfulness and the detail and all the time you guys have spent. So
I'm sure this has been fantastic. We've been here for about a decade, and I wish that all of this had been done before we arrived. So I'm sure everybody else in the room is feeling. My question, and an estimate's fine. I'm just curious, how many more seats would you estimate would be available in the sanctuary, or is it too early to know that?
It's probably too early to know that. There's probably slightly less capacity with what we're showing so far than what we have today, but we haven't studied that. And getting like a higher capacity was not necessarily a goal.
Tony, I want to clarify that. The butts and the pews are more. We just might lose extra space for extra overflow seating, say for Christmas or Easter.
sorry, I thought of one more thing. With the athletic field, is it a must that it has to be artificial turf? Is there any room? I know that if you look around the city, that's like the trend, and that's the cool thing to have is the artificial turf, and it makes us look updated. But does it have to be that, or is there any idea of using the field and just having really good lawn care and just landscaping? Is that an option? I don't know.
Oh, I do think that's an option.
Okay.
Where it's
Is it cheaper?
Natural turf with
Yeah.
irrigation.
Yeah.
The only challenge is that if somebody plays on a wet surface on a Friday, you can't probably use it on Saturday or Sunday. So the synthetic, you don't have to. You can book things and not have to worry about cancellations because it handles the water better than a natural turf. But yes, you could do a natural turf, and we could compare the two. It's money to maintain over time. That's a good question. So nothing's been decided. It's just we wanted to look at that, and we didn't show it on there, but not unlike other ones, we would intentionally keep a baseball in a corner, so you can do baseball in the spring on top of the field and mark that. There's all kinds of schools that have done that.
One other thing on the field and the turf. Natural grass fields are a lot more expensive and take care of over time. I agree with you, the artificial turf, there's some environmental issues with that. They do last 10 to 12 years. There's extensive concussion testing that are done on those before they're actually replaced. But when you replace that field in 10 to 12 years, it's not $3.5 million. You're only replacing the surface at that point in time. The subgrade, the drainage systems all remain in place. But the other thing is just playability. You can get 2 inches of rain on an artificial turf field and you can start playing on it as soon as it stops raining. I mean, that's the advantage of artificial turf fields, is they're kind of indestructible for a period of time. It just allows a lot more play on them more frequently.
Hi. I just want to thank, again, all of you guys for all the hard work that you've put in. And Father Mitchell, I know this has been a big heart project for you in the time that you've been here, is really thinking about how to improve so many aspects of our school. I'm just so impressed with this plan, talking about YCC, the school, the middle school, and the church. So I just want to thank all of your efforts and your heart putting into it. And all of you are the people that have made this happen, and to all of you for being here. I think it's really smart to think about putting the YCC in a new location. For one thing, feasibility is to build it while it's still functioning and move over when it's finished. So I think that's really smart use of our space that we have. Thank you for the City of Prairie Village for realizing that that was our space. I also just want to be an advocate for the middle school space. I know that's kind of a quieter project. I know the YCC is really bad and it has to be replaced, and I think everyone's behind that. But our middle school space, when you walk downstairs every day, and I get to do lunch duty a few times a week, you're walking through the middle school and it smells like the cafeteria. It's busy. Every child in the school walks through it all day long. It is the place in their life where they need the highest level of education. Sorry, my kids want me to come home for bed. And our preschoolers are very important, and it is the heart of the school and the start where they come in. But the middle school is where they're preparing for high school. It is where they're going to have the most memories of the time that they have here, and when we really need to update the quality of education. And it is a place that we lose a lot of kids. They come in YCC, but they leave in middle school. So if we want to leave them with a place that they really remember, that is special, that makes them come back and love this school, I think the middle school is an important place as well. So I think it's important that that is also on our hearts, that that season of life where you're a tender kid that's emotional, that you have this awesome learning environment to be here. One thing about the playground that I also want to be cognizant of is the YCC plan. It doesn't leave a lot of green space left for recess time for the kids. It looks like the playground is there, and then YCC, and then the turf field. I just want to make sure there's a place for kids to play soccer and play and run, because I think being active in the middle of the day is crucial to them. So I just want to make sure that that's something in our plan. And I love the idea of a center aisle in the church, and I hope we get a place that has a big elevated altar. And I think that is a beautiful plan for our church, and I hope that we can find a way that everyone is happy with that space. I think there's so many special things, the wood, the church that's special for so many of us, but I think a big center altar and an orientation where we're all looking at the same thing together would be really special. I just want to make sure that we are not only looking at it for weddings, which are a really important hour in someone's life, but those kids go to school 52 weeks a year on Wednesdays and on Sundays. And so I want to make sure that we're looking at as far as the Christmas program, the weekly mass for the kids to stand up and serve and sing, and just all the places that people get to have special experiences, baptisms, first communions, that there's a big wide space for the kids to be up there and be a part of that celebration. So I think that needs to be a piece of that altar that we are always thinking of. So thanks.
So I can say we've been parishioners as long, if not longer, than Darren and Tony, and it doesn't seem like that long ago. So I'm going to take a very different approach to this. All your guys' comments have been great. It seemed like it wasn't that long ago we did a capital campaign and did all of this. And I know we did a lot of talking and a lot of thinking. And so I guess my question, Father, is can we count on the Archdiocese to be kicking in, or what in those numbers? Is this all just a capital campaign with St. Anne contributions?
I can slow walk the mic to you.
Before I answer the question, I want to recognize our pastoral council who is hosting us tonight. So everybody on the pastoral council, can you raise your hand? Give them a round of applause for all their care for our parish. Yeah, they got to look at this first, and I'm not going to share all their comments here tonight, but those people are very valuable, and thanks you all for being here to greet us tonight and host us. It's the Archdiocese, we send money to the Archdiocese, they don't send it to us. So Jerry, that would be a great scenario. They will lend us half the money once we have half the cash raised at a good interest rate. So that's their way of supporting, and in the end, it's all theirs as well. So we get to build it, and then it ultimately belongs to them. So that's the way the Catholic Church rolls. So sorry, I know we all love being Catholics. So I'm sorry if that's a disappointing answer, but I can't imagine a scenario where they would actually donate to this. So it would be what the parish would want to do. Yeah.
I went to St. Anne's School from kindergarten on. Well, actually, I flunked kindergarten at Blender. We didn't have kindergarten here when I went to Blender, but so anyway, I ended up going to kindergarten here as well. But so the school looks exactly the same as when I went here. We are long overdue. And I completely agree. It just feels like we just did a renovation. But unfortunately, or fortunately, we have to continue to do this. And I think in a way we've been irresponsible in not doing this earlier. And so now we have, in a way, a burden that's a little bit bigger than it should be because we've left too much go for too long. And so I'm excited about what's been put together. I know it's a little daunting to look at the numbers, but I look at all of it, and to me, all of it needs to be done. It's just finding what's the priority and the order. And I have complete, and thank you, Father, and team for putting this together. It's very thoughtful, it's very well laid out, and I have all the confidence in the world when if we see that the feasibility says, yeah, we can do some or all of it, I've got all the confidence in the world that the financial side from like projecting out what it's going to cost and all that will be done in a very fiduciary way that we're in a great spot. So I will say on the church and the remodel, I do appreciate being close because I'm hard of hearing. But we can solve that with good acoustics. And I want my daughter to want this to be her church when she gets married, that she wants to be proud of, to walk down the aisle. And I just see too many families from St. Anne's that choose other churches to get too many parishioners that choose other churches to go get married in because they're aesthetically and just spiritually more appealing. So I'm in favor for that. And I know it's hard. I know change is hard too. But I think the experience will be well worth it. So thank you.
Personal note to add on to that, my eldest got married 5 years ago, got married in the Catholic Church, but didn't want to get married here. She went to school here since kindergarten. She wanted a more traditional framework for the photographs, and we got married at St. Peter's, which is a beautiful, small, very narrow aspect ratio, but gorgeous, old, historic, beautiful church, and that's what she wanted, and I couldn't deny her that, even though it would have meant a lot to be here, but it was her choice because it was her wedding. So yeah, I agree. I wouldn't want that to happen. I would want that. I wish she had that option here when she got married. I'll just say that.
And I'll agree to that too. It was a fantastic presentation. I
I think we all are agreeable that these things need to happen. We need to keep up with the times. I mean, we live in a community here in Prairie Village, you know, and these surrounding areas. The people are tearing down homes and building bigger homes. I mean, this is a community that people want to live in. And as I look across this room, it's generational people that have went through this church. And, you know, our kids went to school here. I hope my kids can move back in here and go to church here. But we've got to do things, you know, with the Young Child Center. There's got to be a push. We've got to have those feeders coming into our school, into our church. And we've got to make our church, you know, look more like a church. Where people want to go and can hear better, because we heard that a lot, and that was the one thing that, you know, as my path, I talked to my dad today about it. He's like, Joe, I can't go to your church. I can't hear anything, you know, and I think that's a big thing. That's a big thing. So I just want to say that you get the emotions, I think, in this room, Father and team, to do something, and I really hope we can make it happen.
Okay, yes. Yeah, thank you all for being here tonight. I know it's getting late. We've been in those seats for a long time, and since it's Lent, we have free water for you over here. So if you guys need to quench your thirst. So all the comments that were made are deeply meaningful, and are taken with great respect. And you know, St. Anne's is a very, very special place. It means a lot to a lot of people for good reason. It's where our deepest convictions are celebrated, where we have our deepest experience of God and the community that He wants us to experience, explore the meaning of life together, and help our children to grow into their full stature as children of God. So it's meaningful for so many reasons, and I'm excited to try our best to see if we can invest in this mission. I do believe if God wants it, the resources are out there somewhere, and there's a way if there's a will and if there's faith. Faith always attempts the impossible and oftentimes wins. So I do want to move forward in faith, and I do think we have the kind of community and the opportunity to try our best to invest in this mission. So thank you for the input. We'll see where we go from here. Everyone, please fill out the survey. So even if you were thinking something, you didn't know if you wanted to say it in front of everybody else, or if you had, you know, maybe even a sharp criticism or a negative reaction that you didn't feel comfortable sharing here, the survey is for that, and you know, to give voice to all of those. So we're not limited just by what was spoken. In fact, we hope that many will in the parish, we hope everyone in the parish will view this presentation and will weigh in. And we'll let AI analyze all the comments and spit out where the heart of St. Anne's is at this point, what our appetite is. So thank you all so much. Let's say Hail Mary together. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.